How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Hardware Overload and another build video. Now, originally I had something fun planned for this build because I have a Intel Core i7, or it's not an i7 anymore, that sucks. It's the Core Ultra 7 265K with an RTX 5080. Now, again, originally I had planned to actually build inside my first ever gaming case, which is this bad boy, which I've sold for 15 years. I don't know why I kept it for so long, but I just love the damn thing. So I actually kept it. I was planning to build it inside this, and I figured, okay, it might be a problem to fit everything inside because everything has just gotten bigger compared to usually we think technology is going to shrink, but I mean the size of the GPUs nowadays just doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. But anyway, so I thought, okay, I pre-fitted the GPU, I pre-fitted the motherboard, alright, everything will fit. But now, in the end, the problem was actually the cooler. So I was planning to use one of my older H100i Elite coolers from Corsair, but the problem is, even though there's so much air ventilation going on in the case, I can't actually fit inside the front because there's too much of a gap there. So that kind of sucked. So I'm waiting for an air cooler that I can actually use for like a next build, and then I'm actually going to be able to build inside my first ever gaming case. And I'm really looking forward to that build. But luckily, I had this bad boy still laying around. So this is the Aorus C300 tempered glass, nice RGB front and everything, just a nice looking case that I'm actually going to use for this build. So I haven't pre-fitted anything yet, so I hope everything will fit, but I do believe it'll be fine, even though how big this GPU is. But now that the case is out of the way, the biggest hurdle, which I didn't think was going to be, now let's get into actually building this system and see also how it performs. Now for our first component, we have the Gigabyte B860 Gaming X Wi-Fi 6E. Always need to go too crazy with the names. But anyway, so this is our motherboard, which is more of a mid-range board. Again, a B860 instead of the Z890 and everything. So I think it's going to be a nice budget fit for our system here, even though we're not going too budget with a graphics card. But we still have that. We can save a bit more on the motherboard and spend on our GPU. So I actually have already done an unboxing on this board, so if you want to see the full, more detailed unboxing video, you can check that out. Now, the motherboard, it does cost around $200, which isn't cheapest, but it's also not too expensive. So you get everything that you really need for this board. So just quickly going over some of the specs. So of course, we have our LG A1851 socket for our Core Ultra CPUs. So the ATX form factor, it does feature a 12+1+2 VRM setup. DDR5 support going up to 6,400 megahertz. So plenty fast enough. We'd have plenty of storage options available as well. One of them being the top one being a PCI Express Gen 5, and the bottom two being a Gen 4, as well as featuring a Gigabyte's easy release mechanism for all of our M.2 to make it really easy to install, but we'll go over that. And just in general, nice set of I/O here on the side as well. You do get our USB 4 then with DisplayPort out and everything. Bit lacking on the USB department, but it's not too bad. Enough PCI Express as well. The bottom two are Gen X1, so just enough for some expansion cards, but nothing else really. So that's it for our motherboard. Just a nice, more mid-range budget board that you can rather save our money on and then spend on our CPU and then GPU. Then moving on towards our CPU, we do have not the i7, we have the Core Ultra 265K. Now as for our pricing, like I mentioned, we're saving a bit more on the motherboard to spend on our CPU here. So the 265K is retailing for around $400. So it's not the cheapest, but it's also not the most expensive. So this is more of the higher end, but also not the Core Ultra 9 CPUs. So it's going to be plenty enough for all of our needs for gaming and everything. Now it does feature 20 cores, 8 performance cores and 12 efficient cores with a base clock of 3.9 gigahertz for the performance cores, and 3.3 for the efficient cores, and a boost clock up to 5.5 gigahertz. So plenty fast enough with a TDP of 125 watts. While we're at it, we can quickly install it as well. Just pop this open and then pop this one in. Just make sure all of the connections are lined up. Triangle in the corner, the notches are there, and then there we go. CPU and a motherboard ready to go. Then next up for memory, we have the G-Skills Ripperjaws S5, which is a 32 gig kit with two 16 gigs inside, running at 6,000 megahertz. So plenty fast enough for our system here. It also is in white, so I think it'll fit nicely with the board. And with our case, it's also going to be a nice white and a black board. So let's quickly install it as well and see how it fits with the rest of our gear here. So just line up all of the notches, and there we go for our top first one, and then for our second one as well. Alright, so we have our CPU installed, our memory installed, and I have to say it does fit really nicely with the black and a white color schema going on. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the final result. Alright, so for storage, we're going to use my Aorus Gen 4 1 terabyte SSD. Now, this one isn't the newest anymore, so it was released a couple of years ago, and I'm actually still using it in my system as well. It's just a nice high-performing SSD. Now, I know the newest ones are Gen 5, and you honestly don't need to go that fast. Gen 4 is plenty fast enough, and they are coming down in price as well. So here we can see as we can see, I'm actually also using it. Still have some thermal paste or thermal pad residue on it as well. So just a nice fast 4,000 to 5,000 megabytes per second. Alright, so now let's quickly install M.2, and I can show you guys how easy it is with the new motherboard. So all you need to do is slide the latch here to the side and pop it off. As easy as that. Same with the bottom ones as well. Again, like I mentioned, the top one is a Gen 5, while the bottom two M.2s are Gen 4. Even though our SSD is a Gen 4 and not Gen 5, whereas the top slot is Gen 5, and that's not going to be a problem if you were wondering. Now, sometimes it might not pick up, and then all you need to do is go inside the BIOS, and then there's going to be a setting that you can just switch the interface to Gen 4 instead of Gen 5. Alright, so now let's quickly pop it in, and then we have our SSD installed as well. Lock it in place, as easy as that. And same with we're just going to remove the thermal heat cover there, and then lock it in place. Boom. Alright, so now we have our motherboard, we have our CPU, we have our RAM, and then also we have our SSD installed. Almost done already. Alright, so next up, it's time for our case. So this is, again, the Aorus C300 tempered glass case. And it's a nice black and a silver color schema going on with some RGB here on the front and the side. So I think this will be a nice substitute for the original plan of using the Landboy instead. I think also the color scheme might not work with the Landboy because it was blue, and we're going more of a white and black build. So I think next time that I'm actually going to build in the Landboy, it's either need to be like full black, or if I go a white, I'll probably paint it as well. So it is a mid-tower, not too big, but I still believe it'll have plenty enough space for our GPU especially. And it does have some dust filters here in the front, at the back, everything at the top. You do have some nice connections at the top as well, HDMI if you're into a VR. Now ventilation might not necessarily be the best because I only have a top there and down here, but I think we'll be able to manage. So we can quickly open it up and show you guys inside as well. Now, I don't believe this case is currently on the market anymore, but when it was around the, there we go, around the $150-ish, I believe. So you do have two included fans here, but strangely enough, they're using Molex to power them. Not sure why anymore, but yeah, that is the case. But no, luckily there are of course plenty other cases that you can go for, either from Corsair or from Aorus as well. So you do have plenty other options that you can choose from. Alright, so that is our case, and now let's move on towards one of the parts that I'm kind of not too happy about. And unfortunately, even though this is a very nice 2000 watt platinum power supply, it's the only one that I have that's above 1000 watts. So I have plenty of 750 watts and everything, but nothing above that except this one. So it's entirely overkill for this system, but we are going to need closer to 1000 watts for the RTX5080 and the 265K. So unfortunately, this is what we're going to just use, but I would also just recommend going either for something like the Corsair RM1000X or something else closer to the 1000 watts. You can even get away with 850 watts. You're probably just not going to be able to do crazy overclocking with that, but that will still be enough. Then next up for our cooler, we have the Corsair H100 Elite LCD. Now you do actually have the newer ones, which is the Corsair IQ Link Titan RX LCD. So yeah, unfortunately we don't have that one. I will say some of the biggest differences between those two is that this, the other one does have other fans. It does, I believe, have a different pump as well, and it has RGB around the pump head as well, whereas we just have a lousy display. So let's open it up, and then we can install it as well. So I have used this one before. It's a nice cooler, it looks awesome, and it's also pretty easy to install. Now, unfortunately, compared to the newer version, that one actually has all of the connectors on the radiator itself, so you don't have to fill around with all of the cables, which is a pain in the behind. So it does make it a lot easier to install with the newer version, and I kind of wish I had one, but maybe for the next build we will. Now the plan for the cooler is to mount it here in the front. Now sometimes I mount it here at the top, but unfortunately we don't have enough clearance for our motherboard to actually do that, so the installation locations isn't far enough towards the side to actually do that. The case isn't also wide enough. I will say the one thing that I'm worried about is the amount of GPU clearance we'll have. Usually, again, like I mentioned, I like installing it in the top, but because we don't have enough clearance, we're going to do it in the front. But that does also take up a lot of space for our GPU to actually mount it in the front. So this could either turn out really well or really badly. It might just fit, or will probably just not fit. So let's wing it and see if it actually if it's actually going to fit. I'm going to be really sad if it doesn't. Usually this is where you kind of need to pre-fit everything, but I didn't again do it for this case. So yeah, let's hope for the best. Alright, so we have our standoff installed. Now I can pop it into our case and get it installed and fastened as well. So I see nobody has removed the peel for the I/O cover here, so we can quickly do that. Failed. There we go. So nice and clean as well. Alright, now I can get it installed here. So line it up with everything. We have a cable here at the back for a fan. Alright, so there we have our motherboard installed. Now just before we install the cooler as well, I'm just going to route the power connector, the 8-pin for our CPU power. Then next up we have our cooler that we need to install. So thermal paste, screw it in, and then do all of the connectors, which is always fun. And that is really where the newer model will be handy, where all of the cables and everything is just connected on the cooler itself. So yeah, I'm definitely going to hit up Corsair for the next time. Alright, so next step is of course to install our cooler. We have our thermal paste here, the Corsair TM30. So let's quickly get that installed. Now, of course, I'm going to use a bit more. Now I'm going to use a bit more than usual, just because I want to make sure that it does do a proper job. Now, the nice thing about the cooler is that at least you can remove the top section, the screen, that you can actually replace later, and it just makes it installing so much simpler. Alright, so now let's quickly see which way is going to be the best mounting position. Probably around like this. So it's going to be enough space for our GPU here down there. And now I can put back our cover here. So it's going to connect this way around. Oh, just like that. And now we just need to route all of the extra cables neatly towards the top. Now, I would have liked it if I could route it on this way around, but unfortunately there's not enough space to actually get it through with all of the different cables and spacing with the fan at the top. So I'm rather just going to route through between our memory slots there. So I think that still looks pretty decent. And I still need to do this one, this super short cable. So let's quickly do that one as well. And now it's just all of the cables at the back that needs to be cable managed. But we'll leave that for later. I'm not in the mood to handle all of that now. Alright, so now that pretty much everything is installed, we only have one component left, and that is what you all have been waiting for, the RTX 5080 gaming OC from Gigabyte. Now, I know there's been a lot of negativity about all of the latest 5000 series GPUs, but honestly, for the performance, these cards are still really good. And I have benchmarked it as well, and comparing it price to performance, it is one of the better cards actually out there, if you can get it for the original MSRP price, which unfortunately is a bit hard to actually get. So MSRP should be $1,200. I believe here in South Africa it's around 40,000 rand, but that is not the case a lot of the time. So hopefully later on the stock and availability will get better. So I wouldn't say you're going to spend twice as much, but if you can get one for around the $1,300, maybe $1,400, then you still have a good deal on your hands. I mean, a 4080, 4090 is still pretty good. But anyway, let's get out this massive card and check it out. So there you guys can see, and now you understand why I'm a bit afraid if this card will actually fit, because it's so big and thick. Just look at that thing. So yeah, we'll see if everything fits. We do have some nice extra goodies and everything. We have a power connector here as well, which we're going to need, and we'll see if we're going to need the support bracket as well. But for now, I think let's just take a closer look at our GPU and then get it installed. So it's still crazy for me that the GPU is only that's long. The rest, this piece, it's just cooling. So it's a thick boy. As you guys again can see, we do have a nice display out here, HDMI 2.1 I believe, then a display port. I would have liked it was an additional HDMI because a lot of my things are still HDMI, so I need adapters, but otherwise, everything else still looks pretty cool. You actually have a slider here that covers the RGB. We'll see if that then lights up the Gigabyte logo there. Nice fans, again, clockwise and counterclockwise. Now, I will say that some of the previous gaming OCE cards kind of looked a bit bland or a bit boring. And even though this doesn't have too much going on, I just like the aesthetics of it. So, nice gray build. Just overall a nice neutral look, which I think will fit majority of systems very nicely. Nothing too fancy or crazy going on as well. And now we'll see if it actually fits. Hopefully it does, because otherwise I'm going to cry. So let's see. Okay, so let's get it in here. It's going to fit. Yes. Yes. Okay. Awesome. It just fits though. All right. I see. I am going to have to remove one of the additional brackets here at the back. but I'm just so glad that it actually fits. I don't necessarily have another case that's open to actually use, so I'm honestly glad that it works. All right, now let's get it finally installed. And there we go. As you guys can see, it just fits. I can't even get a finger in there. Just to show you guys how tight of a fit it is, here's 2 SD cards. Let's see if it'll actually fit in. Alright, so the 2 SD cards is actually able to fit there. So that is how much space is in between the graphics card and the fan. So glad it fits. And there we go. Finally, a system completely installed. Now it's just some cable management that I need to do at the back. And then we can actually get into how the system performs. But first, I'm going to need to take a break because I'm really, really hot. I'm honestly sweating. So, yeah, I'll see you guys in a bit. Alright, and we are done. It took a while, but as you guys can see, it turned out really, really nicely. With the entire white and black color scheme, same with the silver in the front. It just gives that extra bit. And luckily, again, our GPU fit. That was the biggest thing that I wasn't too sure about, but I'm so glad that it actually fit. So if you are in the market for one of these new GPUs, definitely make sure your case will fit it, because yeah, it could be a bit of a problem. You don't want to go buy a new case or a new GPU for that matter. But anyway, alright, so we are done with the build and also with the benchmark. So I'm going to quickly go over all of our gaming benchmarks and then also some of our CPU and production benchmarks as well. And then also I did some temperatures and a power draw test as well, because again, we have a 2000 watt power supply in here, but we're definitely not going to need that much. So we'll see what you can actually get away with. Do you need to go for a 850? Can you go for a 750? I had a couple of 750s. Would that have been enough? Well, we'll see. Now going over power draw first, and for our CPU, again the 265KF, on a very heavy CPU workload, we got an average of 125 watts and a peak of 148 watts. That was just a quick spike, but on average it was around 125 watts, very close to the rated TDP. Now as for our GPU, that drawed an average of around 330 watts. In gaming ranged from 300-ish, or let's say 290 to 320, but for more GPU intensive workloads, we saw around the 330 watts, and we saw a peak of 385 watts. So that was the max that I saw, but usually it was around these 330-ish watts. So it does draw quite a bit, but again, not the 2000 watts needed. So I did also do a CPU and a GPU combined benchmark, which you're usually not going to do, because usually some applications are more CPU intensive, some are more GPU intensive, but doing both at the same time, we saw a power draw of around 600 watts. It occasionally spiked to like 610, 615, but on average it was around the 590 to 600 watts. So you could theoretically get away with a 750 watts, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. So 850 is definitely the lowest that I would actually go. Now as for our temperatures, with an ambient temperature ranging between 24 to 26 degrees, yes, it's quite a bit hot, especially now with all of the lights on. For our CPU, we had an average temperature of 82 watts. Luckily, even though that's high, again, it's only a dual radiator, so it's not a massive thing as well, with the case being a bit of airflow limited here at the front. We saw the performance scores stay at 5.2 gigahertz and the efficient cores at 4.6 gigahertz. I did see occasional drop with a single core going down slightly, but nothing that actually caused thermal throttling. As for our GPU, we saw an average temperature ranging around 70 degrees, and for fan speed, 4040p, that was around a 75%. So also not too bad. Now it does get a bit louder. I didn't do a decibel sound test, but it does get a bit loud, especially with all of the fans going on as well. You definitely feel the heat blowing out through the back. So overall, not too bad, especially, again, not the most airflow efficient case out there. I would definitely go for something like the Corsair 4000D Airflow, something like that. I have one of those, and it's beautiful, and it works really, really well. So that's something that you can take a look at as well. But overall, not too bad, I will say. Now then, let's get into our gaming benchmark. So first up was a God of War Ragnarok, where we saw on a 4040p an average frame rate of 192 frames and 4K at 124 frames. But when enabling a DLSS on our balance, we saw a nice increase to 242 frames in 4040p and 185 frames in 4K. So for Star Wars: The Jedi Survivor on 4040p was 112 frames a second. In enabling a DLSS, I didn't see any major increase frames extra, but when enabling FrameGen, we saw a massive boost to 243 frames a second. Same in the 4K, we didn't see a 100% increase, but went from 65 to 114 to 161 frames per second. So you'll definitely get a nice boost with DLSS and FrameGen. Now, it's not always needed to use FrameGen. I would rather not use FrameGen or if I don't need to, because it does increase some latency, but you do have that option. Now for Delta Force in 4040p, 123 frames a second, 133 in 4K. DLSS, it didn't do much in 4040p. It stayed exactly the same, but 4K, it did increase the FPS to 202 frames per second. But when enabling FrameGen in 4040p, we saw a nice boost to 339 frames a second, but not the biggest increase in 4K, only 214. But moving on to finals, in a 4040p, we got 214 frames a second and 121 in 4K, 260 frames when DLSS is enabled, and 185 frames a second for 4K DLSS. For FrameGen and DLSS, we saw 347 frames per second in 4040p, a nice boost overall, and in 4K we saw 207 frames a second. Again, not the biggest increase, only around 15% or so. Now for Black Myth Wukong on 4040p with DLSS enabled on balance, we saw a 95 frames a second in 4040p and in 4K 63. When enabling FrameGen, it did get a nicer boost to 138 frames a second in 4040p and 95 in 4K. As for Horizon Forbidden West, we got a 4040p, 136 frames a second, 168 frames a second with DLSS, and 249 frames a second with a FrameGen enabled. So a nice 100% increase overall. In a 4K, it went from 85 to 126 to 160, again around 100%. For Ghost of Tsushima, we saw 108 frames in 4040p and 70 in 4K. With DLSS, we saw 124 in 4040p and 120 in 4K. With FrameGen enabled in 4040p, we saw 200 frames a second and 160 for 4K. So that was it for all of our gaming benchmarks, but I did run some 3D Mark benchmarks as well. So Firestrike Ultra, Time Spy, all of that. So you guys can check that out. Now as for our CPU benchmarks, in a Cinebench R23 in single core, we scored 2,145, 34,169. In R24 in single core was 131, and in multi-core 1,983. I did also run the Blender benchmark, where you got Monster, Junk Shop, and also Classroom, which performed quite well. Then next up for fun, I also included the V-Race, the CPU benchmark, the CUDA benchmark, and also the RTX benchmark, so you guys compare that as well. I also ran the new Geekbench AI benchmark, so you guys can check that out, and also Geekbench 6, and it performed quite well there also. And then for the final few benchmarks, I ran SpaceView Perf, so you guys can check that out, and then also 7-Zip and Corona Tape. So that was pretty much it for all of our benchmarks. Again, unfortunately, I'm updating my benchmark database with all of the previous systems that I benchmarked before on the old channel, so I don't have all of that is out for you guys yet, but for our next builds, hopefully that will be out, so I can compare it to a couple of years old even. So if you guys want to upgrade from similar systems to newer systems, then that could be a nice guide for you. But overall, just a nice benchmark. I do hope you guys enjoyed it. All of the parts will also be linked in the video description. I'm very happy with the RTX5080. Now again, the price does fluctuate quite a bit, but that's usually the case when a new GPU is released, and a couple of months later it's going to stabilize. So in the future, if you want to upgrade, the gaming OC is always a nice option to go for. And as you guys could see, it was able to run any game in 4K without issues. Everything over 60, and when enabling frame gen and DLSS, you can even use some of those new 240 Hz 4K monitors, and that's going to be fine as well. So overall, I think this is a pretty nice combo. You don't have to go for the Ultra 9, go for the Ultra 7. Again, the new i7 performs really well. Also, it's going to be fine for all of your video editing and gaming, streaming, everything. It's going to be fine for that, and our GPU is just not going to be a problem at all. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I do hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and comment like always. If you guys want to see more builds like this, definitely let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see if I can get that done, because I want to build it inside my first case, the LAN boy system as well. So we'll see when that happens. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I'll check all of you next time. Cheers, guys.